What a week it has been. The last week and a half, there's been a lot of stuff going on. Customers are asking us, what does this mean? How do we deal with it? So the point of this little podcast that we kind of put together was we just never know when something's going to creep up, and we actually caught lightning in a bottle. And we're going to be able to talk about that. So I want to welcome everybody that's been here. We got a lot of people joining. I am joined by Tabitha Frazina, our director of sales, and Alex Barr, who is our director of delivery. Let's go ahead and kick it off. Let's talk about Fable. So for those of you that don't know, Fable is this awesome model that was released by Anthropic under the code name Mythos, originally. And we all got to use it for about 2 days before the government came and shut it down.
Was it awesome?
Well, I mean, some people got to do some really cool stuff with it. I only got to play with it about, maybe for like a half hour, but like the bigger story is like, what does this mean, right? Like, is the government going to start controlling, what we have access to? Tabitha, I'll go ahead and start with you. What's your perspective on what are you hearing from customers? What are they worried about?
Well, a lot of them didn't even get a chance to play around with this, but definitely with the shutting it down, just got fear of what is the right model, maybe a little bit on the protection side, but just the power behind the technology is freaky, scary.
It was able to do some really good, really, really cool stuff. So
You don't think they would shut it down because it generated an email. Like it's had to have done some pretty.
Yeah, I've heard some things. So the reason why they didn't go live with Mythos is because as part of their red teaming activities, they were able to identify a ton of security vulnerabilities, and Mythos was actually able to act on it. And so they needed to draw that back a little bit in order to feel comfortable about it. And some of the feedback, some of the things that I've been seeing on LinkedIn and Twitter is that the things that got reported after Fable was released are the same things that like OpenAI can do today and other these. It's not an easy problem to solve. And is this really just an assertion on the government's perspective to maintain some sort of control? And I know it's kind of like conspiracy theory.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
But there was this argument between Anthropic and the White House, and there's this IPO, and also a lot of politicians just wanting to have more control of their AI. What do you think? Do you think that comes to play in any of that?
Alex, what do you think? They hadn't thought about it though, really yet, Brian.
My first reaction was, I think you mentioned fear, I think fear's been a word in AI for a while, and this was the newest version of it. And the first thing I thought about was companies have been using this stuff now for months and months. And if they built on a model and just someday the government's like, hey, that one's a national security risk, and rips it out, and they've already put people in different places to do other jobs, and now this tool is just out, what are they going to do about it? I think we're going to talk a little bit about that later. And get into it. But that was my first thing, was just I think it's going to instill some fear of adoption, which might not necessarily be the worst thing, because I think we're going to talk about how to responsibly adopt and where to put your focus. And so, yeah, I don't know.
It was a good segue. Let me ask you this question. So, these models are getting really powerful. And every one of these new generations, actually, that was one thing that was interesting. Fable was the first time we've heard one of these frontier labs come out with a new iteration, a new version, a new naming convention, a new thing. But as these things get more powerful, Alex, do enterprises really need that kind of power, or are we doing something like throwing a Ferrari to go get the mail?
Yeah. I mean, that is the big question. I think that the people that can figure out how to effectively use these models are going to be the winners, and the ones that just kind of throw it out there and have every big crowd run to it are going to be the ones that end up with a pretty nasty bill at the end of the month. So the answer is no. I don't think people should be driving Ferraris to the mailbox, but the people that can figure out which model to use for what problem are going to be the winners.
One thing that I don't think that people understood with this Fable release was In the short term, it was just part of your subscription. Like you got to be able to use it as part of your subscription. But it was right there in the like right top of the chat window. It pretty much said like as of July 1st or July 15th or whatever, this is going to start to convert to API tokens. They weren't going to include it even as part of the max plans. They were going to turn that to a consumption-based, agent, which, to kind of segue to Cowork, which is, I think we're going to spend a lot of time talking today, is the other huge announcement, is the pricing model on Cowork. And Tab, we were talking a little bit about this yesterday, and it was like, well, when GA, that's the big news, right? Well, no, wait a second. Yeah, that's great. That's great news. Well,
We should use it.
once we started talking about the economics about this, the conversation got really, really interesting. And I think we've got a ton of people on the podcast today are here because that is important. What are you hearing? And, what are you hearing? What are the signals telling you right now from customers?
Well, one, it's a new announcement with a 2-week runway, right? So now what, right? I got all excited about this tool. Now I have to plan. Now I have to. So I think the now what, which is I'm sure why a lot of people are joining today and want a perspective on the now what. Do I shut off innovation? Do I have to get the CFO involved? What's the budget planning look like, right? There's a lot of exciting momentum happening on what this can do, but how much is this going to cost at the operational scale becomes the biggest question mark.
Interesting thing to me was when Microsoft announced Cowork, I'd already gotten used to using Anthropic's Cowork and was like, why are they using that name? And then you start to read about it, and underlying it was still just using, Anthropic's Cowork. But now we're seeing signals that it's not just that. You can use GPT. The new Microsoft AI models are going to be a part of that. I'm wondering from your perspective, like, how is the delivery team going to prepare for like just not really understanding how to use this or what it's really good for, how we're going to advise our customers?
Yeah, I think the reality is we're all learning. Like anyone that's claiming to be an expert in this is lying to your face unless they work directly for these companies. And even those people probably don't have their arms fully wrapped around it, but it's a lot of knowledge sharing. Just making sure that all of this news that's coming out and how these things work together, people are staying on top of. The good thing is we've got a great group of people that are passionate about this stuff, and I think just naturally want to do that here. But it's really forcing it into conversations, team meetings, organization meetings, like all company meetings, and making sure people are informed because there's a lot of information coming out, and what's true today is not true tomorrow. So that's a scary part.
That's a really good point. And that actually is one of the things that just blew my mind is that Microsoft made this announcement like that. It was, hey, here's this GA announcement. Oh, by the way, nobody has any warning about this whatsoever. Starting tomorrow, you're going to start paying consumption. Now, I looked at the blog post, and we can drop a link in the chat, or we can get this to you afterwards. But like what I'm seeing is the spreadsheet that Microsoft provided breaks it down into 4 different personas: knowledge worker heavy, knowledge worker light, sales management, etc. And on the low end, they're predicting somewhere around, I don't know, like how to quantify it, maybe like 1.5 like co-work sessions per day, like light usage. That's low end. That's what translates to like $150 in token cost or like consumption cost. And on the higher end, like people that might be more heavily users that are going to do 1 or 2 heavy usage things a week, they're predicting like $250, a month, for some of those. And I don't think it's unreasonable to say that some power users like me might like hit like $800 or $1,000. So the math just changed very dramatically. And that's to the topic that I was, really wondering what your perspective is, and the way you framed it up is this is changing so fast, right?
Yep.
Organizations can't plan on that kind of change, like where the math changes so dramatically in a matter of 2 weeks, right?
Right. Yeah, I think so we're going to get into it, but governance is a really broad word.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of specificity under that single word. And this is just one of those components. I've heard a lot of people talking about, cloud FinOps and this being somewhat relatable to cloud FinOps. And I think at the surface, it is like you can put cost controls in place by groups, by people, by tenant level. But I think it's a lot different than, or a lot less simple than cloud governance or cloud FinOps, because you're taking what is this methodology for a small subset of engineers that build workloads on a platform, and you're now expanding it to the entire company. Anyone with a seat could drive cost up, and it's just a very different problem to solve. And I don't think anyone's got it figured out. So that's the fun part of this, is we get to be at the cutting edge of figuring out how to solve that problem and bring it to our customers.
Robert is asking in the chat that we've heard reports of Copilot clearly having issues, and some like reported Microsoft glitches happening. And do we have any kind of speculation why this is happening? I'm going to ask each of you. This is not a question that we prepped or anything. Like, what your Cav, I'll start with you. Like, why do you think Microsoft is ripping this Band-Aid off so quickly and so rapidly?
Well, I think this was always the plan, right? To your point, like there was always a plan. They're a for-profit company, right? And I think it's timing around their new fiscal year that's happening as well. I think this continues to make AI real and forces the right use cases and the right opportunities for businesses to make change.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. Like, just having a flat rate on this stuff to use it was not making them any money. And it seemed extreme to a lot of businesses. And $30 per user per seat sounded like a lot, but when you actually realize what value you're getting out of it, it's not expensive at all. And I think right now they're just trying to reconcile that. The truth is nobody knows how to price it. And I think this is just kind of testing the market. The 3 or 4 pricing tiers you brought up of like Copilot credits and how they're using, different types of tasks to estimate how much something's going to cost. It's somewhat exploratory. And if people pay for it and it goes well and the business is doing well, they'll probably stick with it. If people pull back significantly, they're going to need to do what they did with the initial Copilot seat license, where, it was large organizations, $30, and then they rolled out a different tier for smaller ones under 300 seats, I think was like half of that. So I think this is going to be similar, but right now it's just trying to figure out what is the right place for this tech.
So let me push back on it for a second. Like, all right, so you said you brought up
Brian.
well, I had a thought too, but I want to push back a little bit because you bring up a really good point. It's that organizations are struggling with the $30 a month. I mean, we see this all the time. Microsoft has really worked with the account teams. They're having a hard time convincing like this to roll this out to the organization. Some organizations are, but now you have this conversation like it's not just $30. It's like that's just the seat license. You're going to pay $150 a month minimum for each one of these users that you let use co-work. You better have a really strong value proposition. Microsoft only has about 1% of their M365 customers that have actually formally adopted Copilot seats. That's not a lot. That's showing a lot of struggles in this market. You add this kind of cost on top of that. How do they get over that? How do they make this ubiquitous in organizations where they hit a 50% threshold?
Yeah, I think it's going to be being more intentional about what use cases are actually worth the cost of this. And it is going to cause organizations to pull back short term. Every weak workflow that was automated is now going to have a price tag associated with it. And that price tag probably outweighs the ROI that it actually generates. And I was joking around with a peer a couple of weeks ago, and he was like, at what point are they going to start bringing humans to replace agents because of the cost of it? And I think it's a real conversation going on right now. But the one thing it forces is organizations to look at use cases with a little bit more intention and say, is this going to be worth the cost of automating? Which before, I think you're kind of saying a conflicting point. It was expensive before, but you really look at what this tech is capable of. $30, if somebody's using it the right way, is not too much.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that statement 100%. You were gonna.
I was thinking just along the same route. So just thinking of customers that have hundreds and 500 agents just sitting there, but also how many of them are actually doing anything.
Right.
And now to this point, I just think the collaboration between technology, the technology teams managing these agents and setting up the governance and structure, but the business and the financials of it really owning the value that it does to these teams. Like, I just think it's the organizations I see doing it well are already having those conversations with the business. And it's not just like IT owns this budget for agents and are the ones setting up the $30 a seat. Like, this is going to accelerate and force those conversations to really happen.
Oddly, you and I had a conversation with a customer probably about a half hour ago, 45 minutes ago, and that they said, we're still going to use it, right?
Yeah,
So I think some are going to continue on this
of course.
path, right? Some are going to control it with the governance controls. Here's my take on this. The question was like this abrupt, kind of aspect of it. I think something changed. I think Microsoft either underestimated what these consumption costs were going to look like in the short term, and like what the average user was going to like produce with this. They wanted to get this GA. They're ready to get it GA, but they couldn't go GA with the cost model they had in place. And it was preview, right? So like they had that ability to make changes. It's very, very rough. So I just think that something must have happened, or it could have been the Microsoft side, or it could have been the Anthropic side.
Right.
They're getting ready for the IPO.
Yeah.
They need to show money. And maybe they went back to Microsoft and said, we can't support you on this pricing model. We're going to change it, and you're going to have to pass that on to your customers or absorb it. So I don't know what happened, but the fact that this was not rolled out with any kind of like signals, build, we talked about this, there was some stuff at build that was, that alluded to this. None of that kind of came out. It just seems like real sloppy from a Microsoft standpoint. And so I've got a couple of questions here talking about ROI and how can we like, control some of this. Tabitha, you've got a pro tip.
Oh, yeah.
I've got one tip that I'll share really quickly is if you are using Cowork today, you can use /cost as like,
Yeah.
go ahead and explain it.
Right now, if you're using Cowork and you ask it to do a task or agent, when you're at the end of that, do the /cost, and it will tell you how many tokens or credits that it's used to do that action. So right now, between this time, and like Brian said, we'll put the link in there if you haven't seen it on the announcements of the buckets and then how much each of those tasks are going to cost you. That's a good way to just start right now seeing the things that you're asking it to do, how much it is generating. So with the /cost.
/cost, and to talk about
And only Cowork.
Cowork.
It doesn't show you that in Copilot.
Yeah. And there's some Copilot stuff that I ran to this morning in prep for this that we should talk about as well. So just to give people an understanding of the cost here, here's some of the numbers that will help you sort of like compartmentalize this. A light thing to do might cost 125 credits. Something that's medium, they're budgeting around 500 credits, and a heavy workload. A long running task, something that is going to happen is 2,500 credits. So we're talking about 1 cent per credit. So you do the math. This is on Opus. That $125 to $250 a month comes pretty quick. That's using it twice a day to get that kind of some consumption for a task. And I think you need to start figuring out, people should actually start figuring out how to use these tools most effectively. Strategy that I have, that I've developed personally over time is that when I'm using more advanced models or using Cowork specifically, I'll use something lighter, low cost to help me build a prompt that gives like a really explicit set of instructions so that it's not, just flailing about trying to figure it out. So as an example, I think one of our coworkers was talking about using it to update a statement of work template for just changing the client names, right? Like something really trivial. And he used Cowork to do that, and it cost like $4 to do just that task. I mean, realistically, that saved like 2 minutes time. Not a really good use case. I wonder if he would have used like a different way, and if he could have just said, here's the prompt, I can get that down to 50 cents, to really optimize that. So people just need to start thinking about that. I'm sloppy. I have access to these like really, really super high power tools. I'm always running Opus 4.8 at high or extra high, but I think we need to start coming up with different strategies and not drive that Ferrari to the mailbox. As fun as it is,
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't do that. Okay, so anything else
Well,
on?
what are some ways that, I mean, people that are like multi models happening, what are some ways up front, Brian, that can help them know that versus doing it, finding out the cost, but figuring out an efficient way? Is there?
Well, okay, so Microsoft has got a couple of different ways they're going to manage this. I don't know what the token cost difference between Opus and GPT-5 is, but it's different, right? Microsoft also is coming out with their co-work model, so it's their own specific
Yeah.
model. That's going to be probably almost a 50% reduction in the token cost.
Yeah.
And then there's other strategies that they're rolling out to help people sort of mitigate these costs. The point is, and what I was trying to like articulate is use tools, for the intended purpose. Use the low cost tools to help you frame up your argument, frame up your instructions. We're really, really good at that. And then once you have a plan in place, throw it at the big cohort if you need to, if it's going to be something that's going to be helpful. And then use that WAC cost, to sort of say, is this worth $5? Is this worth $20? Right? Because you might like think about that and go, wow, I'll just spend the 2 minutes to do that myself. So that's the way I would look at it. I also just want to call out as we're on this conversation that this isn't just the co-work aspect of it as well either. So Copilot is moving into Copilot is moving into a consumption model, not in a way that you would experience with the chat, but more from the standpoint of if you're using the work IQ components and you're making API calls against that, they are changing that into studying your workflows that you're using that use third parties to kind of interact inside of that whole agent, framework. There's going to be that same cost model going into play as well, and it's the same pricing structure. So you're going to be paying those Copilot benefits. Yeah.
Well, one thing just quick to tack on, I think when you're talking about knowing which model to use when, it's just interesting because not only is this technology itself changing fast and making everyone kind of scramble to figure it out, but even the definition of something you think you might be doing as a company or you have already done. So take adoption and training, for example. 6 months ago, adoption and training didn't necessarily include thinking about which model to use when, because if there wasn't a big problem that existed. And so I just would say that I think it's important that as this stuff evolves, you're re-looking at everything that you have in place to make sure its impact all the way upstream is accounted for downstream.
For like a call out, because when it's a fixed price, use any tool. But when there's these, might need to then make sure you are either adding new models to your organization that you maybe didn't consider before, or different ways to use the models that you have available and set those structured when training and adoption.
Yeah, absolutely. So co-work is one kind of like autonomous, like workflow agent that we've sort of discovered. Microsoft had built out this Scout, agent as well that we haven't gotten an opportunity to play with yet. Requires a few heavy-handed steps, and I honestly don't recommend any organization just to turn it on.
Yeah.
I think you do this in a kind of a pilot. You gotta turn OpenClaw on. You have to have consumption wired out to your GitHub Enterprise, for the tokens and consumption. And we don't know a lot about that. But strategically, do you think that this is a way for Microsoft to give different options, or what do you think the use cases are for this Scout agent that's coming out?
I think it's just kind of a natural evolution. Like even when you think about the simple chatbots, when some of this stuff was first getting hot on the market, people were building chatbots and pointing it at one or two documents, or you think about like an HR use case of pointing at your human resources handbook to let employees answer questions. And as this evolves, like people don't even want to have to ask the questions. And I think the whole premise of Scout is that it's just kind of continuously running and serving things up to you versus you having to ask questions. So it seems like a proactive play on it is what it feels like. I agree with you. Like I would be a little bit cautious about just like flipping it on and letting it run, because I think there's a lot of information that still needs to come out about it, specifically pricing. Like I haven't seen any formal pricing model around how Scout's going to work. I'm assuming it's going to be somewhat consumption based.
All consumption. Yeah.
But what does that mean for something that runs without being prompted?
Dab.
I don't think I had too much to add on that. I do think it's to serve different use cases, but also, yeah, continue to win at the AI game.
Yeah, I think it's a way for Microsoft to have an exit strategy out of this co-work thing if it doesn't pan out the way that they want. That's kind of my prediction is that, I still don't see a distinct value proposition for one or the other. I don't see enough difference between them. But what I did see is that this is the first of these autopilots that Microsoft's talking about. And so maybe this is an exit strategy for them to promote their own way of building these types of long running autopilot autonomous tasks, stuff like that. We got a couple minutes left. Any predictions? Any thoughts?
I just one question for you. I think a lot of what we've been talking around is the governance word that I used before. And I think it, generally speaking, when it's heard, people think data readiness and people think cost. And I think it's way more multifaceted than that. So I'm just your opinion on like what are the key pillars to really make sure you're looking at when you hear a vendor or anyone in your organization talking about governance with AI.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head that data governance is really when people say governance, they're thinking about, I want to make sure that my data is protected. Like I'm not losing company secrets. And, we're seeing a very distinct shift right now in the cost of AI, how it's going into more consumptive model. And I think that this per seat model and a fixed cost for people using these tools, it's gone like at this point, and we need to prepare for that. And so the governance things that we need to be start doing include some of the cost optimization and how we're controlling costs. If we're doing pro projects, we've been doing that for years now, for a couple of years. But when it's these, tools that used to be per se, like nobody cared. And we got to start caring quite a bit about what that's going to look like. And to the point, when we sort of glossed over this in co-work, you pretty easily can go in and say, I'm going to set this user group has access to it. This everybody else doesn't. So you can kind of control it that way. And then you can set, usage limits or consumption limits, on a user basis, group basis, and the organization wide. So if you're not doing that today, I think you should do that. I think every organization should figure out what is that maximum that you want to put. And that doesn't mean that people can't use it. It means that they're going to have to click the button that says like, can I use some more? And somebody's going to have to prove it. So I think that's the shift. I think that our governance work is going to include more cost modeling than before. And I think, my takeaway for people that are on this call is start thinking about those, like what is the value that I'm getting out of this agent, this task? Because I think that's what people just haven't really cared about. So you need to start thinking.
Yeah. And I would just say like the role that may not have existed before within your organization that will need to exist to actually manage all of this, because another governance pillar that I think is going to start getting hot is just like this model maintenance. Right? You build agents or you build workflows on a specific model and then it gets deprecated, then what? So people are going to have to manage these things. They're going to have to understand the cost of using them. And there's some new roles that will exist in companies that don't exist today.
I thought there were going to be less jobs with AI. Dad, you got the final word. We're ready to stop.
I think this is just going to be a fun, exciting time. I really hope it doesn't slow down the adoption, because I think it's very powerful for organizations, and we're seeing just processes, governance, everyone sit up a little bit straighter and really think about what's their secret sauce within their company and how they can use AI. So I think it's an exciting time. We're all buckled up and happy to talk more.
All right. Well, fantastic. Thanks a lot for joining us. We're at time. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone.